Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. It is officially January 1st, 2025. So I am trying something new. I've flipped my camera because I'm hoping this will format with YouTube a little better. I noticed that when I film vertically, it doesn't fill the whole screen. So trying this out, hopefully it works. We'll see. It's a learning curve. I'm not a YouTuber by any means, any stretch of the imagination. I'm just a human and doing things that I thought I would share with you all. So, anyway, so on that note, it is January, so I have been using a couple of my days off here to kind of get all of my business stuff in order. I filed my LLC January 27th, like 2024. What year are we in? So I've been technically in business for a year now, and this is my first tax season with an LLC. So I'm reviewing a bunch of the books and such that I consulted when I first decided to do an LLC, and kind of rereading some of them, especially now that it's winter. I have time to reviewing some of those books that kind of help get me started, and I'm hoping will help me stay in business. It's a learning curve. Whatever you're doing, you're learning as you go. So I thought I'd share maybe actually one of those books with you guys. One that's really helped me a lot. And this is technically the first of the book series of videos that I'm going to do, because I would like to kind of do some, not really reviews, but just summaries of books that I've found really helpful and that I really enjoy, and that either play a part in the herbalism or the business or the ecology side of what all it is we're doing. So one of the books that I wanted to start with, I'll get into it here in a sec, but it's called Traction by Gino Wickman. And this book, I read it, gosh, it was years ago now, when we first lived in Washington, and I was working in the legal cannabis industry for a startup company. And this company was having a really rough time. We just could not get consistent sales. It was 50,000 one month and then literally zero the next. And then it would shoot back up and then dive off again. So it was a roller coaster, to say the least. So one of the things that we did when I was working for that company, I was pretty much the production manager, general manager. I kind of created my job as I went, and that's kind of the role I ended up in. And so we brought in a consultant. This guy, he does big businessy things, and he said that he could help get us on track for having growth, and then he wanted some share in the company as payment, something like that. So what he recommended was that we read this book. So this is called Traction, by Gino Wickman, like I said. And we read it as a group, and we're talking, this is a really small company. It was 2 owners, only one of which was very active. One sales girl who was kind of working a second job too, so she was there and then she wasn't there, and then me, who was pretty much doing everything else. So there were not many of us, but we all read this book pretty much in record time, and then we had a sit down with this guy who walked us through all the steps of it. And it was really informative, just as a learning experience. We did stick to the systems that are laid out in this book for a good couple months, and we actually did see some of the growth and such and stability that we've been looking for in that business. And then there was some legislation stuff that happened, followed shortly thereafter by COVID, and the whole thing kind of tanked, unfortunately. But by doing that and being there and seeing how a startup business works that wasn't my own, it became a really good learning experience for what I would later do with mine. So I kept this copy since then, and I've kind of reviewed it a few times through the years, especially as I was thinking about doing the LLC, and I just recently decided to reread it and like really focus on actually doing the steps that are in this book. And that's kind of my, I'm not going to say New Year's resolution, because like in this it talks about why you shouldn't set yearly goals, but it is my first quarter resolution to get back on track with this and continue it throughout the year. So, about this book, Gino he has helped many companies grow and kind of maintain their business, so as to kind of avoid that up and down that we were facing with ours. So one of the things that he really talks about in here, and this entire book is laid out in these categories. So he says there's 6 components to a successful business, and one that persists. So he says those components are your vision, the people, the data you collect, the issues that you come across, your process of doing things, and then traction itself. So each of those is a separate, it's not really a chapter, but it's a chapter, but it's a section of this book, is each of those categories. And so especially in the vision component, which is the first, he has these forms actually, it's in here, I have it bookmarked. So he has these forms, and when you buy the book, you can get PDF copies of these, which are he calls it the entrepreneurial operating system, so shorthand to EOS. And so in here, it walks you through how to set your vision, which for him, he calls it the 2-page business plan. Less is more in this, like, operating system. So he talks about simplicity, keeping things simple, not overthinking it, not doing a 10-page business plan, keeping it down to the bare core bones of what you do will help keep your vision and then everyone else's straight about what it is you're trying to accomplish. Like, and that's from like the employee perspective, but also from the customer perspective of what do you actually do? What do you offer? So, and what kind of pain point is your business solving in the customer? So, there's a quote in here. It's not his quote, but I don't know who he really attributed it to. He says, "He who chases 2 rabbits catches neither." And it really is in a part where he's driving home that, like, simplicity is the best approach by far. So with the business plan, the 2-page business plan, like, one half of this whole part is about, like, identifying your core values, your core focus, your 10-year and 3-year projections, and then what your marketing strategy is, and that's pretty much it. And then later on, it kind of breaks down into a little bit more with the 2nd page, which is a 1-year focus, like your 1-year vision, the problems that you're having, the problems that you identified, and then what he calls rocks. And he explains why he called it that in the book. But essentially, rocks are your quarterly goals. So if you're thinking like business quarters of the year, he says to not set, like, very few, like only like 3, if that, 3 to 7 quarterly goals. And these are things that you have to do, excuse me, by the end of that first business quarter. And then you do a reset after the fourth month, which would be April. Set it again until July, and do the same thing throughout the year for the 4 business quarters. And he says that's a much better way of staying on track and kind of really truly accomplishing the things that you want to do. It holds you accountable by doing meetings like weekly reviews and then monthly meetings to see kind of where you are with those goals, and then to revise if you have to, pick things up where you need to and where you see the issues starting to crop up. And so in that way it holds more accountability with you and your business. And I really kind of identify with that because, like everyone else, I'm notorious for setting a yearly goal, a thing I'm gonna do, and then halfway through the year I'm like, I don't even remember what it was. And the more time you give yourself to do something, the more you're going to stretch out your time and fill it with other things that may or may not matter. So then you either lose sight of your goal completely, or at the last minute you're sitting there like rushing through what should have taken you months in 1 month. Just feel better. And I don't like doing that. I think a lot, nobody does. And so that's where I want to, like, my goal for the first quarter is to give this a thorough review, set my goals for this first quarter, and then resolve to do it again in April, do it again next quarter. So the other thing he talks about is to really hone in on what is measurable about your business, and to keep daily or weekly track of just the numbers. Like, to create a spreadsheet of the things that are most crucial for your knowledge to know how your business is doing. So, like, that might be revenue, that might be profit, that might be how many leads you got that week. You know, it can be kind of tangible, intangible, but like as long as the intangibles have a number you can assign to them. Like, did 50, questions, inquiries, and then got 3 leads, kind of thing. So he says by tracking that more diligently, you will then have a better snapshot of how you're doing, what you need to improve, where issues are coming up, and then when you go through that issues part of it, like he talks about in here, like how to identify them. And it's kind of comforting the way he talks about like issues in a business, because he says that like when you're starting out in business, it all feels new, like I'm the only one who's ever done this kind of thing, I'm the only one who's ever had this problem. But that's really not the case. And he says that there's pretty much all business problems can be boiled down to a certain set of issues, whether that's lack of capital, lack of the right people, and he also goes into how to pick the right people for the job. For us, it's kind of simple. It's me and my husband, so we got the people and those people yet, and neither of us are going anywhere. So that's one part I kind of skip over a little bit, at least for now, because we kind of both know where our strengths are and where it's feeds into the business. So, but when it comes to the issues, like in that regard, he's talking about people in like a bigger organization that they've hired a bunch of people, and some people may or may not be in the right fit of like their position for what their talents are. And so like that's the way he talks about the issues is kind of comforting, because even when you're small, like all the way up to a big business, like you really do deal with a lot of the same problems. When you're small, it's more like the lack of capital, like lack of profits, like getting orders, things like that. Whereas when you're bigger, it's like, do I have the right people to be operating this most efficiently? Those kinds of things. And so that was kind of really encouraging to hear, actually, because it feels like this whole different world that I'm not familiar with. Like, some of my family has run businesses. My dad has. He's had his own carpet cleaning business. He's flipped houses. He's done a lot of different things. But when I was younger, I didn't understand the things that he was telling me because he was trying to teach me. But it was like, read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And even then, I was like, this feels over my head. Like, I don't fully understand how this relates to me personally. So now that I'm doing it myself, all this is kind of coming back around. And I did reread Rich Dad, Poor Dad and understood a lot more of it now versus back when I was late middle school, early high school, and that was just not my worry. It just wasn't even on my brain. And I didn't know how the world works in such a way that I wouldn't be able to just get the job I want and do that happily for the rest of my life and have it pay all my bills and get me everything I want. It's hard to conceptualize that when you're a kid, that the way the system is just rigged, and what the actual advantages are to having your own business and fighting for your freedom of time, because that's the real, asset you have is time. It's not money. It's the time that you can use to then do what you want. That's what you really want. So now I'm kind of in this spot where I've had all this work experience. I've been in different jobs. I've had the dream job. I've had the job that I really wanted for the rest of my life. And it paid crap. It was horrible. And there was no way to get ahead because they would just dissolve positions instead of filling them. But they would give you the work that you would be doing in that position anyway. And not even make you full time. They had me working literally about 39 hours a week. Just barely enough to keep me under, where it's like they're trying to push you down so that they don't have to pay more. Which I understand, but it's not ethical. So, and then I've also worked for a big retail chains, and retail just sucks. I don't recommend retail. I've also, like I said, worked for the startup companies, like a small startup, but then we got bitch slapped. I'm just gonna say it. We just got bitch slapped by legislature and laws and all this stuff, that all these extra expenses, especially in Washington, that were just meant to keep down these small businesses and make more room for the bigger chains that were taking over. And there's just, I really hate to say it, but there's a lot of corruption in even that industry, even in the legal cannabis. Because these big companies that have all the money, they're raking in millions. And they can pretty much say whatever they want to and do what they want to and essentially lobby. It's no different than big politics, like lobby on the state level to do these things that they create for us, it was a vape ban. It was a ban against all vape products, cannabis vape products, because of they didn't know what the terpenes were. So terpenes are just aromatic molecules. The same terpenes that are in a cup of coffee that give it its smell, give it its, scent and sometimes taste. Those same molecular compounds, and there's thousands of them, but they're not different molecularly from what's in chocolate. There's just different ratios of all of them. There's just different combinations that create all these different smells. So you can extract terpenes from lemons, like actual lemons, mix it with the other terpenes that go into something like the phenome for super lemon haze, and create that compound. There's companies that do this. And you can add that terpene profile back into your distillate after it's been, or when you're doing a distillate, it pulls all the THC compounds, but it essentially burns off those terpene molecules because they're highly volatile. So you kind of have to add back in the scent profile. Well, they were saying that unless those terpenes themselves came from cannabis plants directly, that it wasn't allowed. And we went down to Olympia and we tried to tell them, these molecules, and my coworker at the time, she studied all of this at Cornell, and she studied it in her entire life, so she went down there and she's trying to explain to them, these molecules aren't different, even if we're getting them from, botanical sources, to put back in the weed, it's the same thing. And if anything, by doing the cannabis extraction of the terpenes, you're wasting so much of that plant because you're just pulling the aromatic molecules. So we got shut down for many months because of this ban, and it was brought on by a lot of the big companies who said, oh, this isn't ethical, this isn't right. And it wasn't just against us, it was a sweeping ban throughout the state, because they were claiming that cannabis-derived terpenes were better somehow and healthier for you, and it all started from this scare where one of the big companies themselves, put vitamin E oil in their vape. Which is just to, essentially water it down. It doesn't have anything to do with the flavor or the terpenes at all. So, long story short, the corruption in that industry kind of just tanked our little budding business, and that was kind of the kill shot, unfortunately. What really ended it was COVID after that. So that situation is kind of weird, and I don't know if that's kind of one of the issues he talks about. I don't think it is, actually, is the outside, legislative issues. But when it comes to just your general internal issues and problems that come with running a business, this book really does a good job of, going through that. So there might have been a little more info than necessary about cannabis industry, but it's hard not having gone through that to talk about it finally. So, at least in response to this book, I think it was really valid for what we were going through up until that point. So, if there's some big legislative thing that you deal with regularly in your business, this book may or may not be the best source. But if you are operating and you were just trying to get your wheels going, then it really is valuable and it's a great resource. And so this is one that, this is my goal for first quarter, and then to carry on through the rest of the year is to really dedicate myself to laying out my business this way and seeing what I can do with helping more with the herbs and how to convey what it is I really want to do, what's on my heart, what matters to me and my husband, and communicate that to our audience, for lack of a better word, but the people that it matters to and they just don't know yet. So I like writing things down. So I actually created a little binder that has these actual, the scorecard, the business plan, and I printed them out and I put them in there, and just some stuff for taking notes. So if you really do like this book, I would recommend putting it in a written form and have it be something that you review once a quarter, maybe once a week, or I made it so there's sections. So there's a section in here I review every year There's a section in here I review every month, and then there's a section in here I touch on every week, or as often as I can. We'll see. So, long video short, I guess. Sorry, that kind of drug out a bit more than I thought it was going to be, but Traction by Gino Wickman. And I highly recommend it if you are a small business owner, even if your business is well established and like you just need to kind of gain that control over what it is you're doing. And this will teach you how to kind of delegate responsibly, but not delegate responsibility, So, highly recommend it. Thanks for listening along, and I will see you in the next video.